Hello again, everyone. I'm John Harper. Hope you have a chance to pull up a chair and sit for a spell because we've got a great show coming up for you today, hosted by none other than the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard and the host of our show, Kerry Fink. Good afternoon, Kerry.
Hey, John, and thank you for a great introduction. It's always such a delight to be here on the radio Wednesdays, lunchtime hour.
It is.
12 noon to 1 p.m. right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. And, John, the audience keeps growing. Folks tune in all over on EJF, WEJF.net, because you can stream the show live there. And then, of course, we make all these shows available on podcast so people can catch these topics later. And I think today's show, John, is going to be a really good show that is going to be one of those shows that this is kind of like a minister friend of ours says everybody loves dessert messages, but sometimes you need a spinach, kind of eat your vegetables message. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think this is one of those shows that you're going to, you need this, you want to hear this, you want to get acclimated with the topic matter, and then the reality is you're probably going to want to maybe revisit this show. So that's why we always make our programs available on a podcast wherever you find podcasts. So any place from iHeartRadio to Spotify, Apple, iTunes, it's what we do because so often people will want to reference this back. And we are so fortunate to have in the studio today with us one of the such good friends of the Helping Seniors organization. He's been involved in it since the day it started. In fact, he goes back just like John Harper, you do, with Joe from when Joe was building up Brevard Alzheimer's. And we're talking about board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Good. Good afternoon, Kerry.
Well, great to have this conversation. And we titled the show, and I realize this is going to make some people go, do I really want to talk about this? End of life. And we're talking about healthcare decisions that you need to be thinking about. Living will is, I think, what the other title that we dragged in. And then we talked about something called the Do Not Resuscitate Order, which is something that many people need to become aware of. And so, again, like I said, it's not really a dessert message. It's kind of an eat your vegetables message, but it's something we do need to tackle. And I guess one of the things, Bill, we've talked about over and over, Joe was always serious about everybody needs to make an aging plan and they need to come up with some thoughts for the road ahead. And really, we've kind of euphemistically called it getting your ducks in a row. We say one of the lessons in that get your ducks in a row planning kind of stage is don't try this on your own. Get all the information you need, get the expert advice that you need, get it locally from someone. We're always railing against 800 numbers and people seeing an ad on TV and saying like, oh, gee, I can do my will online. And then Bill and his law firm spends a lot of time and energy, which translates to billable hours for people that didn't do it the right way, having to kind of sort out when they misstepped that way. And so today what we're going to talk about, hopefully we're going to try to keep people a little bit out of that. And Bill, I've often said that, and we've talked about this a lot, that when people do their planning, it's really that you're doing it for yourself because it's your own peace of mind. But as much as doing it for yourself, you're really doing it for your family because you are making it crystal clear how you want things done. And that's going to reduce stress at a time when anybody in your family might be, well, Dad wanted this. I don't know.
Very true, and especially true when we talk about end-of-life decisions.
Yeah.
And what your wishes are there and not having to put your family through making those decisions for you.
You know, it's scary, right? Because none of us really wants to, tackle that head on. We just always think, well, it's not me, But I guess there is, you've been doing this so long and helped so many people over these years that you've seen it done well, and then you've seen it not done well.
Correct.
So let's talk about how to do this well.
So to do this well, you really have to know the two main documents that deal with this. The first one is the living will.
Uh-huh.
And the living will is what your wishes are if you are incapacitated, meaning you can't tell the doctor or the physician, and you are in either a terminal condition, an end-stage condition, or a persistent vegetative state. So, and let's talk about those real quick. A terminal conditions, like the doctor's giving you got cancer, you got 6 months to live. End stage conditions, something more along the lines like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, where we don't know exactly, how long you got to live, but you are winding down.
Yeah.
And the last one, persistent vegetative state, is basically a coma with no brain activity and no meaningful interaction with your environment. And you indicate whether or not you want life support withdrawn if it is only going to prolong the dying process. Basically, you would die naturally. Now, with a living will, remember you are alive. You have not died, but you are only being kept alive by artificial means. And when we talk about living wills, usually we're talking about things like ventilators, pacemakers, feeding tubes, that kind of thing. And you also usually indicate whether or not you want the artificial administration of food and water. Again, if it's just prolonging the dying process. So you make those wishes known. You sign it in the presence of two witnesses. One of the witnesses cannot be a relative. Okay. And then it should be given to your healthcare providers. So your primary care physician should have a copy of it. If you go to the hospital for a procedure, bring it with, because they will ask you when they admit you if you have one. And generally have it out there so that your wishes are known. The second document, and there's a lot of confusion about this, is something called a do not resuscitate order. That is a form you get from your physician, and you and the physician have to sign it. And basically it says if you die, you do not want to be resuscitated. So when you think about a do not resuscitate order, generally think about the paddles.
Right.
Okay? Now, everyone probably should have a living will. Not everyone should have a do not resuscitate order.
Right.
Usually you do those when you have, or you're very old, or you have some serious medical condition, and if you code, you want that to be it. Again, letting you die naturally. The do not resuscitate order is yellow. You should carry it on you. A lot of places they have, like independent livings or assisted livings, they have a little holder on the back of the door where you put these things so that if something happens and the EMTs come in, they don't try to resuscitate you. And sometimes, if you have seen that, some people who don't have these things, they will come in and try to resuscitate them to the point of breaking ribs and all kinds of things. And it's not unusual sometimes for people to code again and again and again, and they have to keep resuscitating them.
Oh, my goodness.
So that can be very, very ugly to watch. I have not seen it, but anybody who's seen that happen says it's not very pretty. So with the living will, you're alive, but you don't want, but you're incapacitated, and you're in a terminal condition, an end-stage condition, or a persistent vegetative state, and you don't want the dying process to be prolonged by like a ventilator, a feeding tube, pacemaker, whatever it may be. A do not resuscitate order, you're dead, but you don't want to be brought back to life.
Yeah.
And that, again, is the paddles. The reason you wouldn't do it when you're young is because, say, you got in a car accident and you coded, and of course you want to be brought back to life.
Sure.
So that's why you don't do these when you're do not resuscitate orders when you're young. But everybody should have a living will. In fact, the majority of the really big right to die cases all involved people in their 20s.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like we've talked many times about some of those.
Yeah, like Terry Schiavo, and there's the one I'm thinking, the one girl in Chicago had a drug overdose. There was another one where the lady had a car accident, and then there were these huge legal fights. Again, because they're 20 years old, there was a huge legal fight of whether or not to terminate life support.
And usually that kind of comes up because of differences in opinion from family members, right? I mean, isn't it like somebody says, I want this, and then the other one says, no, we got to do this instead, and that's where it gets protracted.
Correct. And they get down and start mincing whether or not somebody's minimally conscious and kind of things like that. Some people just can't let go. That's one thing. They don't want to be the person who does that. And the other ones may think it's a more humane thing to do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as we're having this conversation, I come back to something I remember Joe would often say. He said, Kerry, there's nothing easy about getting old. He goes, it's not for the faint of heart. And so when we hit some of these topics like what we're talking about today, it's funny. I mentioned the first corollary that we said to get your ducks in a row is don't try this on your own. Get some expert local help who's really familiar with everything and has experience in the area. I don't care if it's like you're looking for a place like a residence for your senior years, what your senior living options are. Find somebody local to help you navigate that. If you're looking for questions about Medicare coverage, find somebody local who knows which doctors take which plans, those kind of things. And if we're talking about legal questions, make sure that you're getting somebody who is solidly grounded in Florida elder law. And we've even talked about this before. You don't want just an attorney. You want somebody who really they know this ground very well. It'd be like going to a doctor who says you need a cardiologist and you go to a podiatrist. It's not going to help the situation. You need the expert for that.
And there are procedures where you can terminate life support even if somebody does not have a living will or a do not resuscitate order. If they have executed another form, which is we call a designation of healthcare surrogate, and they've designated somebody to be their healthcare decision maker, then the healthcare surrogate could withhold the life support. But before exercising that right, they have to be satisfied that the patient doesn't have a reasonable probability of recovering capacity. So that right could be exercised by the patient themselves. Mm-hmm. And two, that the patient has an end-stage condition, a persistent vegetative state, or a terminal condition.
Yeah.
So if you have a healthcare surrogate, they could do that, but they have to go through that little plan. Now, if you don't have a living will, you probably don't have a healthcare surrogate either.
Right.
Because usually they're done hand in hand. Well, Florida does have another statute called the proxy statute, and that says basically who makes your healthcare decisions in the absence of a healthcare surrogate, and they have a kind of a pecking order. And it starts off with a court-appointed guardian. Mm-hmm. So if you have a guardian of the person and they've been given that right to manage your health care, they could do it. Then it goes to the patient's spouse, then an adult child of the patient, or if there's more than one child, a majority of the adult children, a parent of the patient, an adult sibling, or again, a majority of the adult siblings, if there's more than one, an adult relative who has exhibited special care and concern for the patient and has maintained regular contact with them. Next, a close friend of the patient. And then lastly, a clinical social worker. Yeah. And that social worker cannot be employed through the hospital, though.
Okay.
It can't be part of the hospitals. And then they have a little bit different procedure. They have to be reviewed by the facility's bioethics committee, and they must document the efforts to locate the proxies from prior classes, must be recorded in the patient record. And then again, they have to go through the whole same procedure as the healthcare surrogate, which was, again, assessing whether or not the patient will regain capacity and whether or not they're in a terminal condition, end-stage condition, or a persistent vegetative state. So they have a little harder path if it's just the social worker. But any of them still have to go through that assessment of whether or not the patient will regain capacity and if they're in a terminal condition, end-stage condition, or a persistent vegetative state.
Yeah, we're talking about end-of-life issues that come up with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. And I was thinking, as you were kind of going through that, that's why so often we talk about the importance of people getting documentation together ahead of time, because if stuff is moving rapidly and you don't, we've talked about this so many times, if you don't have a plan, the government has a plan for you. It just may not be the plan that you would prefer and may not work the way you might hope it would. And some of these decisions that you were talking about, those two pieces of paper, the healthcare surrogate and then the living will, and how that's always part of, like, I know we've talked about before, like getting these big five kind of together that you really want to make sure you have kind of documents from an elder law attorney so that you really are set up. And that way, because I was thinking, like, even when you were describing some of these big headline kind of cases, mainly it seems like because the path wasn't necessarily made clear, now you got family members saying, like, well, I think they want this, and then the other no, absolutely not. The family member wants that. And that just is like you're at a time of maximum stress, and so it's just not a great situation for anybody to be in.
Yeah, and if you go back to the Terry Schiavo case, it was the husband versus his wife's parents.
Right.
And they both adamantly said, the husband said that she had told him she never wanted to live like that. They wanted to keep her alive. They said she was minimally conscious. And that went round and round and round for quite a while.
Right. And at the end of the day, all of that would have been prevented if she had simply had the opportunity to do exactly the document we're talking about. Am I saying that right?
Correct. Because then we don't have to rely on whether she said something or not. We have it all written down on a piece of paper, and we know exactly what her wishes are.
Yeah. Well, these are all like very, very, I would say almost ticklish topics. But there's nothing, because there's not anything funny about them, but they are very serious topics. And I guess one of the reasons maybe we don't dive into this is we don't know how to answer some of these questions ourselves.
Yeah, and the Karen Ann Quinlan case was interesting. That's the one in Chicago with the drug overdose. She had been, laying in bed comatose for years.
Wow.
And so, but there was still an argument between, I forget who the parties were, about what to do. Yeah. So she had been just languishing while this was all decided.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you're to your point, these were young people. So it all, now everything's going through courtrooms. There's all that expense. Everything is moving with all that. Whereas, again, if the person had simply had that piece of paper, then everybody would have known exactly what was to be done.
Correct. You don't have these big legal fights over 99-year-olds.
Right.
Everybody kind of says, okay, they've had a full life. When you have a 20-year-old, that's when people, have these kind of fights.
Well, there's another kind of Machiavellian kind of approach. Does money in a family sometimes play into where these fights come up? Like,
it could. Sometimes the person who's in the coma has a very good pension, and
so better that they stay alive.
That ends when they die.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
wow.
or if they die, their life insurance kicks in. So, there could be monetary aspects to life or death.
Yeah, so it seems like if you're really, focused on doing things, this is what we're saying. We want to do this the right way. What's the right way to do it? The right way is you get this package of documents together, because then it's going to answer all questions without having to have a lot of controversy about it, because you've already said, this is how I want things done. And then it's not only good for you because you have that peace of mind, but it's also good for the family because they say, well, you might disagree, but this is what mom said or dad said or whatever. And then at least we know, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, Bill, we're getting ready to go into the mid-show break, and I want to come back and I want to ask you some questions about, like, how do we make these decisions? If we come into your office and say, okay, you got us, we need to do this. I want to ask you a question about, like, how do you help people decide these questions? Before we get there, if somebody real quickly wants to learn more about this or get some more information, how do they reach you, and what's the best next step?
They can get to us through our website, floridaelderlaw.net, or they can call the office at 321-253-1667.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with William A. Johnson. We are going to take our mid-show break. Just before we get there, I wanted to let you know of a couple of things that are that we really want you to think about. One is the Helping Seniors car raffle. It's our fundraiser. We're in full swing for that, and we're going to reserve a minute or two at the end of the show to talk a little bit about that, but I want to make sure you get the date on your calendar. October 26, 2025. I was just having the conversation that, as a nonprofit, we can only go as far as people help us to do so. And so Joe Steckler, literally one of his end-of-life requests was, guys, keep this going. This is important. You got to keep the work of helping seniors going. And one way you can help us to do that, to get this information out as a 100% local to Florida nonprofit, is by participating in the car raffle. It's a fun way to do it. Get details at helpingseniors.carraffle.com. We'll talk more about this at the end of the show, but be sure you stay with us because we want to really make you an expert at this topic about end of life. So stay tuned. More of Helping Seniors coming up. And welcome back to the second half of the Helping Seniors Radio Hour. We always get together around the radio lunchtime Wednesdays on 90.3 FM WEJF. And if you're catching this as a podcast or you're streaming along, I want to remind you, you can always go back and pick this information up, forward it to somebody who the conversation might be appropriate for. We keep learning that in the Helping Seniors world now, getting into 15 years of service in the community, 100% local to Brevard, that we find out like a lot of the materials people will really gravitate towards. They'll seek it out when something becomes particularly appropriate. Now it's like very much on the radar screen. In fact, it might be you're on a collision course with it, and now you need some information. And people will use the internet to find Helping Seniors resources like that. So it's one of the reasons we catalog everything we do. So almost going back to the very beginning when Joe Steckler created Helping Seniors after his successful development of the Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation. He said, I want to continue this program of making sure families have education about the things they're going to run into. So we have 15 years worth of materials of everything from TV shows, radio shows, articles that we published along the way. They're all there at helpingseniors@brevard.org, and we get the reports back from families that they really like to go back and search it by topics. And today's topic, we were joking sort of at the front of this. I said, I have a minister friend who talks about, it's always fun to give a dessert message to parishioners because they love it and they go out on a high note. But he goes, sometimes we got to give them a vegetable message. It's going to fortify them. It's going to do them good. It might not necessarily be the message that they want to hear, but it's important that they do hear. And that's kind of the topic we have today. We're talking about end of life. And Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with William A. Johnson, one of the reasons I say that is because I have a sense that people will probably search those words at a time when it has significant meaning. And yet our hope is people would hear this before then and take the appropriate steps, because we were talking in the first half of the show, you see how it can be done well and peacefully and without stress because everything's been properly put in order and documented versus the chaos that can erupt when everybody's just freaking out because, let's be honest, that's what we do when we don't have a good plan.
Correct. And half of what I do is the chaos.
Yeah, I was going to say you have to become an expert chaos manager, but we've been talking with the first half of the show, and if you didn't get to hear, that's why I want to encourage you to go back and check it out as a podcast. We're really talking about several different topics all in one. We're talking about, first of all, end of life, just in general, the paperwork that is appropriate to have. We talked about the concept of a living will and maybe how it could be related to that healthcare surrogate, because you never know who's going to have to make those decisions. And then we spent a little bit of time talking about this a document called a Do Not Resuscitate Order. And one of the questions I want to ask you is, I was thinking, like, as we're going into the mid-show break, so why do we procrastinate? Well, we procrastinated everything, so that's kind of a bad question to ask. But why in particular do we procrastinate on this topic of doing paperwork that we think is important? We might say, like, I want to get all my property, I'll do a will or something, but then we'll miss this part of it. I don't know if we just don't want to deal with it, or maybe, and I'm going to hypothecate, we don't know the answers. We don't know how to answer the questions you might ask us.
I think the number one reason is people don't want to think about their death.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in some cultures, that's taboo.
Yeah.
So, but I think, that's the number one reason people just don't want to think about it.
Yeah, but, some of these questions, because I'm close enough to understand a little bit about the questions that get asked in that living will portion, because I remember actually dealing with this with our own mother who, it was actually my wife's mother who had a stroke and then was with hospice, and these questions came about, do we take out the feeding tube? And, the problem is the natural reaction for the family is like, oh, that sounds cruel and unusual. We all need food. And, and yet when we've been through a lot of lectures at the Florida State Guardianship Association from a lot of the experts, and they say, you're looking at that all wrong. But I guess my question to you is, Bill, when somebody comes in the office and they're already doing the right stuff, they're like, we want to get our paperwork done, but they're not sure what to check box next when they get to that. How do you walk them through that?
Well, first thing is I put the statutory definitions in the document.
Okay.
So right in the document, it tells them what terminal condition means, what end stage condition means, and what persistent vegetative state means. So they have the definitions right there. I also, they don't have to check all the boxes off. Some people have seen people who have died, as you said, from the feeding tube being removed and them not getting food or water. And some people have said it's horrible to watch that. Other people have no problem with that. I also, if they don't, if they're uncertain about how somebody's going to interpret these, words of art, the terminal condition, end stage condition, persistent vegetative state, I give them an option that they can just leave it in the hands of their healthcare surrogate. And then I even have another option that says I want all means necessary used to keep me alive. So, I give them that option as well.
That kind of comes back to, like, at the end of the day, what we really enjoy in life should be how it goes all through our life, which is you get to decide about what you feel best about. And I think that's one of the things, because like we said in the first part of the show, if you don't make a plan, the government has a plan. It just may not be what to your liking is, but it's going to happen if you didn't say otherwise, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that probably rears its head in the specter of guardianship more than anything.
Right.
We had a case a few years ago here in Central Florida with a professional guardian, Rebecca Fierley, and she had entered as her guardian for a gentleman, had entered a do not resuscitate order, even though the ethics committee of the hospital did not recommend that. But her and the doctor signed it. And then the gentleman coded, and it was a mess. I think he aspirated, and it was quite a painful death. He had two relatives who came out of the woodwork after all this. I guess they weren't willing to be the guardian for whatever reason, but then they came out of that, and they were taking her to task, and in fact, they try to sue her civilly, but they also went after her criminally. Well, the interesting thing is at that time, there was no prohibition on a guardian signing a do not resuscitate order.
Uh-huh.
It was not something you had to get a court order to do.
Right.
And in fact, Ms. Farrelly walked on most of the criminal charges because of that. However, shortly thereafter, the legislature changed the statute and required that if there is going to be the use, if a guardian wants to have a do not resuscitate order, they have to go to court and get a court order. Sounds great. And that, you would have the doctor testify that the person's in the, terminal condition, end stage condition, persistent vegetative state, and they won't regain capacity. However, in practicality, it is very difficult because if somebody codes over a weekend and is brought back to life and then codes again and brought back to life, that could go on, and you're not going to be able to get a court order because the courthouse is closed on weekends. Yeah. And a person's going to be put through that again, sometimes 40-something times.
Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah, because you can't get to the courthouse until Monday. Yeah. So I think it was the last legislative session, they did a little fix on that. And it basically says if you are in a hospital and you're incapacitated and you're in a terminal condition, end stage condition, persistent vegetative state, and the doctor, certifies this person needs a do not resuscitate, then the guardian can execute one, and then they immediately have to file that with the court. Also, if there is a pre-existing do not resuscitate order, that has to be filed with the court as well. Interestingly enough, some jurisdictions require a court hearing, even if there was a pre-existing do not resuscitate order.
Wow.
And then some don't. They just want to be aware of it.
Yeah.
However, there doesn't seem to be any authority for the court to ask for a hearing on a pre-existing one. And by pre-existing, I meant pre-existing to the guardianship.
Yeah. Well, it's really, it shows the complexity of this, which is, again, kind of just making the point that when you do your paperwork, then you are in control of what happens with you, because guardianship is really that question about what happens if you're not able to be in control of you. Somebody else has to.
True. And even the new statute for guardians, what if the patient's at home on hospice or in an assisted living or nursing home? It only addresses if they're in the hospital.
Yeah, that was a question I asked you at the start when you were first explaining it to me. I said, well, a lot of people said, well, my preference is I want to die at home, so with family around and all that. So you're in hospice, and then this happens, and then if you don't have all this straightened out, they're still going to have to try to bring you back to life. Am I saying that right?
Correct.
Wow.
So, but if you're in hospice situation like that and you had a guardian, they could probably go to court.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some sort of time on your side to get that. But it makes and we talked earlier about the Terry Schiavo case. That was a guardianship. Mr. Schiavo was the guardian for his wife, and that he had filed the petition to seek authority to execute a do not resuscitate order or terminate life support, excuse me. It's unclear whether he, at that time under the current law, whether he even had to do that. But when he filed that petition, that's what opened the can of worms, and then her parents and him were fighting it out in the guardianship court. And then, quite frankly, the state of Florida got involved. Yeah. And they were trying to thwart the removal of life support as well. And so you can imagine you go from, a horrible situation to a much, much, much worse horrible situation.
Yeah, it sounds like you're like this ping pong ball getting knocked around, and while everybody is like arguing their points, you're the ping pong ball that's getting smacked every time. And it's like, but here again, do the documents. We don't have these questions.
Correct.
So I mean,
and in Terry Schiavo's case, the whole case really hinged that he testified that she had told him she doesn't want to live in a situation like that, and the court believed him, and that's really what took the day.
Yeah, but how long did that day take, right?
Oh, it went for quite a while.
Everybody kind of like, if you don't know much else about guardianship and things like that, you probably know that name. But, that's really the point. Like, in the Helping Seniors world, we're really about helping you kind of deal with and cope with the questions that you're going to run into. So often when people call the Senior Information Helpline, they're running up on a situation. It's like almost running up, for lack of a better put it, on the scene of an accident, and they're trying to figure out, what do I do now that this has happened? And, what's the next step? I don't know. Mom can't come home from the hospital. Is this going on? We get all these calls all the time. And let me give you that number if you don't have our Helping Seniors Information Helpline. It's a free call. We answered it more than 4,000 times last year, and we are here to serve you. So that number is 321-473-7770. I'm going to say it again so you get a second to grab a pencil and jot it down. It's 321-473-7770. And Bill, so when people are calling us, they're trying to find these solutions. But we always try to, wherever there's an opportunity, come back. It was one of the things Joe was always strong about. We got to educate families about these questions, why we're doing the radio show right now, because all these like horror stories that we hear and sometimes splash across the national news, if we just get our paperwork right, we're not going to run into those things because it's clear what everybody's supposed to do.
Correct. And your wishes are down on paper, and there's no doubt what you want.
And you and I have talked about this so many times. There's an economic aspect to you because what it costs you to get these things correctly done is like minuscule compared to like the aftermath when people start fighting over stuff.
In fact, hospitals have the standard living will form right there for you to, if you don't have one, you can get one at the hospital. Sometimes your physician's offices have them. Yeah. Obviously, people who do estate planning or elder law attorneys have them as well.
So, Bill, here we go. It's kind of generically the question, but if you do a lot of seminars and things, I know most of the time you're talking about topics related to estate planning and things like that, which I imagine this will be part of. But if somebody says like, okay, you woke me up, I got to pay attention to this. Are there resources that they should be studying up, or what would you say the next step somebody should take is?
Well, you can go to, there are seminars on these topics that we're talking about. So, and the other thing is you might want to, if you're considering either of these documents, talk to your doctor too. Yeah. And your family.
Yeah. So if they want to learn more about this and all the documents they should be having, I know you have a great website, FloridaElderLaw.net. We've talked about this book that you published, which I think is a great first read for anybody trying to get like their arms around the situation of all this elder law kind of stuff that you need to be aware of. You call it, I should know this title by now. Say the title again.
The Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
Yeah, you find it in the Boomer Guide, but you can also find it on your website, FloridaElderLaw.net, and then you can just download it and read it. Or
correct,
they could maybe call your office. You could send them one if they can't get it. But it's a great document because I remember reading it years ago as Joe had asked me to first step in and start helping some with helping seniors. And I remember because we were dealing with aging mothers at the time, and it was really good for us to have had that opportunity to read through it because you had written it in a way that you didn't have to be like a legal expert or a medical expert. You could just get some good basic understanding of the concepts you need to be aware of. So really encourage you. And if somebody wants to call your office, what's the best number to do that?
The best number is 321-253-1667.
And then you also do a series of educational seminars like at One Senior Place. And we always tell people, like, if you go, like, you get your Senior Scene magazine, there's a schedule there, or they could call the office and find out what's going on. But definitely, I think the more you invest your time and energy in this, you're just going to have a better outcome from the standpoint of it's going to be less stress for you and for sure your family, so that these kind of horrific squabbles don't come up, and then everybody can at least go like, well, no, that's what they wanted. This is what they asked for. You got it, Toyota, or whatever,
right?
Whatever they said. Yeah, so important. So speaking of cars, although Toyota is not one of the cars you can win in the Helping Seniors car raffle, I want to take a minute and talk about the Helping Seniors car raffle, because it is our major fundraiser for the Helping Seniors organization. It comes up. This is our 9th run at it. It comes up on the October 26th. We're going to be out at the American Muscle Car Museum. Once again, Mark Pylock has generously opened his doors and said, nope, you guys come on out. Want to help you guys do this. He's done that every year since the Helping Seniors car raffle has been operating, that he's been open. So that's 8 out. This will be the 8th out of the 9 years we'll be able to be back at the American Muscle Car Museum. We take it not for granted, because it's always a thrill to be in there. He has so many great cars in there. Such a fun time. The collection must be 500 or something by now. I'll have to ask Andrew and Ed, the folks who keep the museum going on behalf of Mark. And also, he's got everything from tanks to like Schwinn bicycles. I mean, it's like incredible. He's got a collection of everything. So even if you've been there before, you want to go back simply because there's so much new stuff to see. Right, John?
Right, you are, yes. Yeah. I was just going to say, Jim Votro always mentions the pink slipper.
Yeah, they got a pink slipper.
It's a pink high heel shoe. That's right.
Yeah, right.
And everybody loves to get photos in that. And it's a motorized shoe. That's what's the funny part. I guess Mark could hop in it and tool around his collection if he wanted to.
I love it. I think it's the greatest thing he's got over there. I really do. I think it's a lot of interesting things beyond that, though. Really.
Yeah, even if you're not, I tell people that all the time. You may not be the biggest car nerd, but you will enjoy the museum simply because the collection is that astounding. He's got original like outboard motors, and it's just incredible what he's got there.
Don't forget the Schwinns. The Schwinns are really important.
I believe he's got a collection, if I'm not mistaken, of old radios as well.
He does. And so when you go, remember, and I tell people this all the time when we're out hawking the tickets, I said you can only get into the museum because it's basically his private garage otherwise. So the only time you can go in is when he's helping a charity, and we've been very fortunate that he's been helping us all these years with that. We're gonna have a big day out there. It's going to be fun. We're going to have our friend Bill Antonetz, who does all the great car shows. He's going to invite about 300 classic cars also to the field. So we're going to have all the cars inside, all the cars outside. We're going to do the Brevard Adventure Village, and somebody is going home with a brand new car. So the way this works, you get a ticket, one for $25 or $5 for a $100 donation. You will have your pick when we pull your winning ticket that Sunday afternoon, October 26th, and you're going to decide about one of 7 great cars from A.J. Hires dealerships. And it's your pick. Like last year, Jim Newman from Cocoa, he wanted the Chevy Colorado, so that's what he's tooling around with. The year before, we gave a Mitsubishi Outlander to Diane Pelak because that's what she wanted. And along the way, we've had many great winners. This time, you're going to pick from a Mazda Miata convertible. You're going to have the choice of, if you like four-wheel drive off-roading, a Jeep Compass Sport. I mentioned the Chevy Colorado. There's a racy little Dodge Hornet. There's a Mitsubishi Outlander we talked about. There's a Mazda 3, a little elegant sedan, and there's even a Kia Sportage in there for you to select from. So you will go home happy with whatever car you want.
It's a classic car bazooka.
It really is. It's so much fun. So you got to get a ticket to be in to win it. How do you get a ticket? You can call us today, right now, 321-473-7770, and Karen or one of our volunteers will get you squared away. You can get your tickets by phone. You can also go to helpingseniorscarraffle.com, get them there, and within literally like the next week or so, we're going to have them out at all the Boniface Hires dealerships. And, of course, you can pop by Joe's Senior Resource Center at 1344 South Apollo Boulevard, second floor, during business hours. We'll get you tickets there. But get your tickets, support our work, and we appreciate you being part of Helping Seniors. That's the time we have, so we'll see you next week right back here, Wednesday, 12 noon. Thanks, Bill Johnson, elder law attorney, board-certified elder law attorney, for a great topic, our vegetable message of the week. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Kerry Fink. We appreciate it. Bill Johnson, thank you as well. You've been listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard, the program for and about seniors.